Hi guys, again this is Lordy, ang tito mong psychologist. Welcome to my channel, and for this video, we'll be talking a lot more about abnormal psychology. Okay? So some disclaimer, all of the things that we're about to discuss in this video are a product of my collection analysis of the different available materials that pertains to this subject. I'm sure that I won't be able to cover it all, but as much as possible, I'll try my best to give you an overview about what abnormal psychology is and other things that are related to it. Alright? So, huwag na natin patagalin pa. Let's dig into the details. So, when we talk about abnormal psychology, it is basically understood as the application of the different psychological theories, concepts, principles, and practices in understanding basically abnormal behavior, mental illnesses, or a psychological disorder. Now, how do we define these things? How can we know that a person is experiencing an abnormal behavior, a specific form of mental illness, or a psychological disorder? Let's try to define what a psychological disorder is first, okay? So, when we talk about a psychological disorder, it is a dysfunction within an individual that relates to their ability to think, to experience emotion, and even to produce action. It typically results to significant distress and impairment across the different areas of their life functioning. When we talk about impairment, it means that they fail to function well, not just in one particular setting, but even on other areas such as their occupational setting, familial, social, interpersonal, etc. Okay? So, it is also something that deviates from what is culturally expected from an individual. Later on, we'll be talking about some of the common features of these psychological disorders. So, somehow, these definition that is given for a psychological disorder covers how we now define mental illness and an abnormal behavior. Okay? So now, let's dig into the core features of these psychological disorders. So there are actually 5D's that we need to remember in order to classify whether a specific set of behaviors, cognitions, and emotions can be already considered as a form of a diagnosable mental health condition or a psychological disorder. That would include deviance. As mentioned earlier, if a person's behavior, action, and even way of thinking significantly deviates from a typical or culturally expected set of behaviors, then that can be now considered as a form of deviance. Not just in the form of, or in a way, how we understand our culture, but as to how we also go through our day-to-day lives. Like for example, if I used to be doing these set of behaviors in a day, but then there would come a time that I would be deviating from those usual activities significantly. I hope you could take note of that specific term, significantly deviates from the usual set of behaviors that I would usually do. That can now be already considered as a form of deviance. But that alone does not constitute a psychological disorder. That's just one common feature that we would usually see in a psychological disorder. Okay? Like for example, kasi pwede namang ako usually nagtatrabaho, pumupunta sa clinic, pero at one point in my life, I would take a risk. I would spend some time, for example, in the mountains or in the province. So that's still considered as a deviance or a deviation from a usual activity. But without the other common features, it cannot be considered as a form of psychological disorder. I hope I am clear with that. Okay? Kaya nga pinasok din natin, deviance in relation to a psychological disorder should also be a deviation, a significant deviation from what is usually, culturally, or typically expected from a person's behavior. Alright? So that's just the first D, which is deviance. Now, let's move on to the second D, which is far more important than the first D. This is known as distress. This is when the person or even other individuals who are closely related to them are already experiencing unpleasant and upsetting experiences due to the person's way of thinking, their emotions, and their behavior. Okay? So it produces distress, a negative form of stress that affects the person or even other individuals around them. All right? Moving forward to the next D is dysfunction. I believe this is already covered from the definition, no, of the psychological disorder that I just discussed. When we talk about dysfunction, this is when people fail to function well in life. It interferes with their day-to-day functioning, with the way they do their job, with the way they attend to their classes, and in extremes, even in a way on how they can take care of themselves. Kahit yung mismong pagligo or pag-aalaga sa sarili nila, pwede nang maapektuhan if these dysfunctions reaches a specific threshold. Alright? Next, danger. Okay? So kung mapapansin nyo yung discussions natin ng 5D's as we go through the different D's, mas nagiging severe, no, yung consequences niya whenever these things are present. The fourth D is danger, right? Now, of course, from the term itself, I hope it already implies what it means. That when a person has a risk of either harming oneself or other people, no, that can be considered as a common feature of a diagnosable mental health condition or a psychological disorder. Okay? And the fifth D is duration. Alright? There are certain conditions or experiences from one point of a person's life to another that all of these four may actually be present. Okay? Nevertheless, if it lasts for just a couple of days or maybe less than a week, that may not allow a person, no, or a clinician to give a full diagnosis. A provisional diagnosis maybe, no, but not to the point of giving a full diagnosis, because certain mental health disorders or diagnosable psychological disorders need to satisfy a specific time frame. For some, it could last also for days, weeks, months, even years. Okay? So that's why the fifth D is the duration. We also have to be aware about how long these experiences are being observed or experienced by the person who has or who is exhibiting those signs and symptoms. Okay? Talking about signs and symptoms, ano nga ba ang pagkakaiba ng dalawang yon? I believe on our next set of discussions, mas madidiscuss pa natin siya. But again, there are two different terms that we need to consider whenever we are talking about psychological disorders. Okay? So again, those are the common features that we should be aware of or that are commonly seen in each of the diagnosable mental health conditions. 5Ds: deviance, distress, dysfunction, danger, and duration. Okay? So from there, we'll be moving on towards the different mental health conditions. But before that, let's have an overview first about how our understanding about these psychological disorders grew from the medieval times or the traditional view and up until now with the recent scientific developments.